Hello again, and welcome
Great.
back to Broke Up, Not Broken. If you're going through a divorce, don't worry, you are not alone. This is your one-stop shop for mastering your life and your finances through the entire process. In today's episode, we're going to be talking with Dr. Natalie Marr. Dr. Natalie is a clinical psychologist who specializes in helping midlife women stop keeping the deep, dark secret that they hate their lives. I want to talk so much about this because I was kind of in that
I
space
know.
myself there, Natalie, by
Uh-huh.
teaching them how to find some inner peace and some real joy, maybe for the first time in their lives. As a twice divorced single mom in midlife herself, she brings a witty and humorous wisdom by normalizing that midlife experience. And as a therapist of 2 decades, her vast experience in a variety of evidence-based approaches is eclipsed only by her intuitive ability to cultivate one's own curiosity, growth, and wisdom. I'm confident of this. She is sure to leave you feeling inspired, empowered. I'm already inspired, empowered by just reading your bio and the work that you've done so far in these last 20 years. It's amazing. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by your divorce or your current station of life, please don't be. Dr. Natalie is here to help us break it down so you can feel confident and prepared by creating a clearer picture of not only your financial situation, but how you can tackle the personal and mindset challenges you might be facing in your own life. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up, and let's get you empowered. Natalie, welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on the podcast. I think this is such a powerful service that you're providing for people during a really difficult time. So I'm happy to be here and happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. I have a billion questions for you, like I mentioned in our warm up to this conversation. I'm going to try to keep this to a 20-minute, 25-minute conversation, but I have a lot to throw at you. So,
Okay.
where I want to start is really just how we got to be here, right? Like, so tell me about your experience
Yeah.
and your own divorce experience, and so we can learn a little bit about you.
Yeah. I got married, for a Gen Xer, it was pretty normal to still get married early 20s. And so I met my first husband in my early 20s. By the time we both got to our late, 20s, going into 30s, we were like different people. And so that of my 2 divorces was more of a natural, probably we should have lived together and not have gotten married, but we didn't, hindsight's 2020. We didn't know that back then. But my second divorce happened when I was 43. So more kind of this prime group that I like to work with because honestly, midlife is such a huge change, both for men and for women. And you just kind of end up looking at each other like, is this all there is? And if you're not going to do that journey of figuring that out together, it ends up being better for you to part ways so that you don't, really double down into that resentment and some of the negative things that can happen in relationships when they blow up. Now, some of them do, regardless. I mean, there's, sometimes even with the writing on the wall, we kind of double down and dig in and try to make it work, and it just is not going to work. And so circumstances are what they are, and we find ourselves in that. But that's really what happened to me in my second divorce. I think I've said to people before, it would have been the easier thing for me to have stayed and not, pressed the buttons that, we just looked at each other and answered those questions and came on different sides of them. And I thought, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in my 50s and 60s and have put a lot of, distance between time into this relationship and then, come out the other side and still feel the same way. So that's where I found myself.
Isn't that the worst when you're thinking about like every day, more time goes by and you're stuck in this relationship?
Yeah.
Like, is it ever going to get better? And you just keep holding your breath, wondering if it's going to, and then, that day never comes. And then you have to make that decision. I
Totally.
was there myself, and we have some young kids at the time and so on. It was very, very challenging for me, but you have to get to the point where, like you said, you've got to rip the Band-Aid off and start moving.
Yeah.
So how do, and I want to make sure this is, I want to talk about the psychological aspect of this thing, but this is also a financially focused podcast as well.
Yes.
So I want to ask some questions about finance later, but sticking with the EQ stuff, the emotional stuff, like how do you get over that hump, right? I know what my experience was like, and it took me a long time to get to there. Like I wasted years, like 2 to 3 years of my life where I knew it was going to happen. I just couldn't pull the trigger. How do you make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I think with any significant change in life, and divorce is a loss. So that I also just want to name that it's a huge grieving period. And when we're in grief, we're not 100%, duh. So, it's hard, honestly, to grasp onto some of these concepts emotionally in a time when you're compromised. So I just want to name that so that people don't feel like, am I crazy? Like, why can't this makes sense what she says, but it's hard to grasp onto. But I think one of the main things that happens in any major life change, such as divorce, is that the old ways that we did life won't apply in the new life that we're going to create. Not all of it has to start all the way over, but much of it will. And naturally we'll do that through your loss grieving process and moving on. But you can definitely get an edge on it when you go into that knowingly. When you say to yourself, I'm going to unearth the stuff that got me in this predicament. And I'm going to have self-awareness about that, but I'm going to be really compassionate. I'm going to be kind to myself about what I'm seeing, because what I'm not going to do is participate in my suffering. And that's what old me was doing. And so I really tell people, you're going to anchor to this idea of the new version of you who does things differently, even before you're that person. And you're going to kind of ask yourself that question of, what would future me do here? Because old me wants me to, dig down and buckle down and do the old patterns, but I already know the ending to that, right? Maps will only take you to places you've already gone. And this is uncharted territory. So you are going off the grid, and you're going to have to trust that future you is a compass that you want to follow.
Oh, I love that, future you. I always use the term team you when I talk about, working with your therapist, your therapist, and work with your financial person, work with your attorney, and, surrounding yourself by loved ones as you go through this exercise. And that's the term I use all the time. So I love the future you, because that's the one thing that we focus on a lot in the work that we do is, what does future you look like? That's one of the first questions we ask. We have our clients go through an exercise, which is, what are your priorities? What are your soon-to-be ex-spouse's priorities? So we can help understand what that looks like as we take you through the divorce process, and make sure we, from a negotiation perspective and working through some of the financials, understanding what both sides want can certainly help. But that's understanding what, day one of your newfound single life is going to look like. And beyond that is incredibly important.
It's extremely important. And it definitely, I think that how you do your service and how I would do things if you're sitting across the couch for me or I was giving you coaching is really similar that way. You kind of go back to the essentials, right? The values, the things that guide us and that are principles that we live our life by that we're not going to budge on. And then you start to reality test the behaviors that you've attached. You think you're serving that value, but you're not really. So then we reality test that with people. We're on team them, right? We're one of those providers, really to help them re-anchor to the values that are important to them. I want them to have the life that they want to have. I just know that the ways that they've been doing it are probably not going to help them. And I also know as a clinical psychologist that the brain is lazy a little bit. And so what it does is it creates habits. We all know habits, right? But bad habits will not help us in this time in our life. And so you're gonna have to kind of push your brain and your nervous system to do things that feel uncomfortable, that aren't what you would normally kind of do intuitively. And you're gonna push yourself to kind of grow in this direction of the new version of you. So that's why I think that anchor and that visualization is so important for people, because people need something to look at, right? They want to know where they're aiming towards. And the way that humans work, we fail forward. We do not do it right the first time. That is not how the neurobiology of the human works. We, if you want to liken it to kids, we, teach them how to walk. We watch them get up and fall down and get up and fall down many times before their body learns how to balance. Any learning process is like that, even in our adult life. And so we have a lot of preconceived notions that we're going to just like hit it out of the park the first time. That's literally not how we're built. So that's not going to happen. Never
going to happen. So what are some, because this is the one thing that I failed miserably in my own divorce. And I made a lot of mistakes in my divorce. Maybe that's why I do the work that I do, because I'm trying to help other people not step in the same landmines that I stepped in.
Yeah. Well, I can echo that 100%. So yes,
And
yes.
it's embarrassing to say sometimes because, I'm the finance guy. When I went through my own divorce, I was 13 or 14 years into my finance career. And I'm like, oh, I've got it. No problem. I'll figure it all out. And I look back and go, what the hell did I do to myself? Why did I agree to that thing or whatever? And it's because you're in this tornado of emotions and gathering information and trying to make decisions and cope. So that's where I wanted to go with this is like, what are some coping mechanisms, strategies, things that we can do to help us calm our mind to be able to make good decisions?
Yes, definitely. And can I just say it's affirming to hear that even on your side of your expertise that you felt that way, because as a clinical psychologist, you feel like the biggest imposter ever. When you can't keep your stuff together, going through something like this. And yet we're human, right? So we're human first and we do our roles, several steps down that pike. And of course we were both going to struggle. We were destined to. And that's where I start with people is I just want to educate, like, there's a neurobiological response that's happening during divorce, during any major life change that we all are very familiar with. It's the threat response system. So many of us kind of think of that as fight or flight. There's actually several layers of things that we do, fight or flight being only one of the layers of responses. But there's two big camps that we get into. When our life is feeling threatened, we either go into mobilizing to change that or immobilizing. So, and sometimes we kind of bounce back and forth between the two. So fight or flight is actually a mobilized state. We're going to run from it or we're going to fight it off, right? Except that we're still only reacting in the moment to a threat. We're not anchoring to future us. We're not behaving in ways that are going to get us out of it. We're actually just behaving in ways that get the threat away from us as fast as possible. And that's not your agenda when you're going through divorce, right? Your agenda shouldn't be how in every small discrete fight or, moment where I'm worried about something, can I get the heck away from it as fast as possible? Because some of it we're going to have to lean into and be uncomfortable with and figure our way through. The other crude set is to be immobilized. And so some of us feel like we lay around and watch Netflix all day. We're just frozen. We're immobilized to really create any change. But that's actually a common response too. It's like the deer in the headlights, right? So there is actually neurobiology that makes us just freeze and be overwhelmed and not be able to take on anymore. So to answer your question, what really helps us most is to get a hold of our nervous systems, because we can't do good work for ourselves in that reactive threat response system. So we have to get that anxiety under control. And the clearest ways to do that are things like mindfulness practice, movement, and connection with other people that we feel safe and secure with. So we need those three things kind of to anchor our life. There's all sorts of, I won't get nerdy and sciencey on you, but there's all sorts of neurochemicals that fall under those three categories that we need to be bolstering in our body in order to stay in that more safe and secure and connected space instead of feeling like we're threatened all the time.
Tell me more. This fascinates me, and I wasn't smart enough to go into psychology. I was never good at sciences, but so we have movement, which I would presume is like exercise, right? So make sure you're getting out, exercise, vitamin D, and doing that type of thing, right? Then you have what were the other two? There was the surrounding yourself by loved ones. We've already talked a little bit about that.
So movement is pretty clear, and movement can be exercise, but with women. I'm just going to give you a caveat. We put that down on our to-do list, and that becomes another threat in our life.
Okay.
So movement is much simpler than that. It is literally breaking the pattern of feeling overwhelmed or feeling in fight or flight. So take a walk for 5 minutes, go, do a load of laundry, go walk around the house. It really does not matter. You just need to break the pattern. It'll give you enough endorphins in your body that it should shift you out of that feeling very threatened in that moment, just to do movement. So it's very simple. But of course, having an exercise plan or regimen is also really useful. The other is connection, right? So oxytocin, of all of the neurochemicals that make us feel good, is the one that makes us feel good, the strongest, and for the longest period of time. And we feel oxytocin when we're connected. And here is another little insider's cheat for divorcees, is that you are feeling in lack of your oxytocin because this is a breakup and it's a loss and you're going through grief. So even more than usual, you need to be around your tribe. You need to find a tribe if you don't have one, and you need to be around a tribe of people that are lifting you up and making you feel, okay, someone loves me in this world. I'm a wanted human being in this world. And it's really important for you to be affirming that when you're separating and divorcing. And then the other is really just, what was the other? Now, this is a midlife moment. So we did movement.
So I presume meditation.
Mindfulness, yeah.
Meditation,
yeah. So,
breathing exercises, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. So mindfulness is important because it's building up. It's like weightlifting for the brain. So people get this idea that mindfulness is you're going to be a Zen Buddhist monk and you're going to clear your mind and you're going to sit in this like meditative space. You know, go with God if that's what you can do. I've never been able to do that. My mind works way too much. So mindfulness is actually trying to focus on one activity, but what you're doing is your mind is going to wander naturally and you're pulling it back to that activity. That's one rep. Right. So if you sit for 2 minutes and your mind wanders and you have to, 20 to 50 times pull it back in, that's 20 to 50 reps. And you're literally building a superhighway between the frontal lobe and the limbic system, which is where your emotions originate. And you want that superhighway there because our frontal lobe has this magnificent way of being able to calm us down. It can tell the limbic system, wait a minute, we don't need to be panicking right now. But if that connection there is sparse, is like a little dirt road or a grass path, then it's likely that your limbic system is taking over and emotionally you're running your life instead of rationally running your life. So we want to be doing mindfulness because it keeps that super highway like ready and willing to help us kind of come in with this like, do I need to be panicked about this? Or is this something that I can kind of slow my roll? I'll put it on the list of things I need to address later, but it doesn't need to disrupt my workday or, hustling kids to and fro or whatever else is right in front of me right now.
Wow. That's incredible. I never had anybody describe it like that. I meditate myself and it's a little bit sporadic. I try to do, 3 or 4 times a week, but sometimes it's one time, but I think any little bit helps, and whatever lever you can possibly pull to try to get yourself through this.
Right.
I think it's a win. And
it's always a win.
Yeah.
Any lever you can pull.
You mentioned, writing down notes and coming back to things later. And that prompted me to ask, maybe think about like goal setting and things of that nature. I'm a big fan of goal setting, right? And I talk about it a lot, especially with my traditional financial planning clients that I work with, the people that I work with that are focused on things like, when they're going to be able to retire someday and how they're going to get their kids through college or how they're going to buy that, vacation property. We do traditional retirement planning alongside the financial planning we do for people that are going through divorce. And in both experiences, we want to make sure we set goals for the engagement. Like, what are we really trying to work towards and accomplishing? Can you talk a little bit about that and how that, can impact people and some of your tips and tricks there?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of lends to that future me anchor, right? So part of what you're talking about is if we're setting goals, we're kind of concretizing, we're making it like more real what we're going to look like in the future. I want to be able to financially be able to do this. I want to, make sure that this is in this category so that I don't worry about it all the time. It's just something that gets pulled from my account or whatever. Like those are the kinds of financial goals I'm sure you're helping people with. But what's beautiful about that is you're asking them, who is future you going to look like? And how do we kind of have these concretized ways that we can go back and say, so are you doing the steps that gets to that point? And are you doing the steps that gets to that point? And humans love that. We love to be able to like go back and know this is a beginning, middle, and end process. Here is where I'm in with it, but this is where I want to be. So I think setting goals is really wonderful for that. The other thing that it's really useful for, though, is for people who get worried, kind of like what I would call free range worry. They just worry about all the things all the time. That's an indication they're in that threat response system. And so it's also a container. When you have a goal list or a to-do list, you can put them in that container. You know where that container is. You have a responsibility to go back and look at that container, but you don't have to bring that container to the grocery store
Mm.
or, to take your shower in the morning or to bed with you and keep you up late at night, it's in the container. You'll go back to that when you have time assigned for that, but you don't have to bring it with you everywhere.
I am notorious for waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking about work-related things and life. So
Oh,
I'm
yes.
going to remember that container analogy and shove it back in the container and
put it back in that container. Yeah. I mean, literally, I think that's why it's nice to even just write it down. It's like it's out of you and somewhere else where you can access it when you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do we take all this information? I mean, we've talked about it. We've kind of covered a bunch here, and I love it. From a financial perspective, like with the work we do, what are some of the things that I can be doing to help people that I work with? What are the things that the people that work with us? What can they be doing to, on the financial side of things? Some of the tips and tricks or anything that they need to be thinking about as they go through this exercise.
Well, I liked that you mentioned you do, talk about the concept of team, that they might need more people on their team at some point if they're not able to stay in that calm, safe, secure, connected state, because they're probably not going to do financial planning with you. They'll do financial reacting. They'll be in that reactive mode. Mm. So if you're noticing that with your clients, I definitely would recommend that they get a coach or, a therapist during this time. It's a really difficult time. We all, even therapists see therapists. So we all need somebody to talk to during that, or just remind them of the mindfulness movement and connection piece that are they getting enough of that in their life? And maybe that will be enough to get them grounded. So I like that. I like that you're doing that. I think that that's definitely handy. And that's what I would say to you as a practitioner is just have a good eye for when people are slipping in and out, when they're not feeling very grounded. And it's sometimes it's hard to notice. It depends on the human. Everybody reacts a little bit differently, and some of us mask our anxieties a little bit better than others. But you want to kind of see those telltale signs of this is all reactive thinking. This is all emotional thinking. This is not rational planning anchored in the future version of them thinking. And so they are going to need a little something to be able to stay grounded when I have these financial conversations with them. Honestly, I can't think of a conversation that's not more threat response system provoking than talking about your finances. It's how we, it's how we put roofs over our heads, food in our bodies, all the things, take care of the people we love. So it's a subject matter that's likely to cause a little bit of oscillation there. And you can, be okay with that. But if you notice that you have clients that are kind of continually unable to do anything but emotionally think, they need more.
Yeah. Well, hear that, listeners. If you're oscillating, and and if you're a client of ours, I'm going to do my best to make sure we bring us back to center if you're working with us. But it's one thing to, certainly keep in mind. I think this is incredible. So anything we didn't cover that I always ask this question, like, is there any question I didn't ask you that I should be asking you that
no, you asked really good questions. Yeah, no, these are really good questions because this is those were the bullet points I was thinking I'd want to hit given the context of your listenership. And I definitely think your listeners can benefit from those three: mindfulness, movement, and connection, and just understanding a little bit about and having grace for themselves that they're in this grieving loss time. And it is rough. It is just hard. Even a clinical psychologist lost her stuff through both her divorces. Like, it's okay. That's why you need connection. That's why you need to be mindful. And it's why you need to use your movement. And, it's why you need a team of people around you, that you're not alone in this. Will help you find what the journey to the new you is. And you don't have to do that all by yourself.
I really wish I knew more about people like you and divorce coaches. And I mean, obviously I knew about therapists. I mean, I'm a big fan of therapists myself, but with the first mistake I made when I decided I wanted to get a divorce was pick up the phone and start calling attorneys and landed on an attorney. And, you pay a $10,000 retainer. And before you know it, you need to pay another $10,000 retainer because that money goes really, really quickly. And I think looking back, had I followed your instructions and followed the instructions that I give, the advice that I give to our clients now, which is surround yourself with, I pushed away my family members because I didn't want them to be involved in it. I didn't want them to feel sorry for me. I didn't want them to feel like they had to own it. I was going to handle this on my own. And that backfired on me. That didn't work very well. I burned a bunch of money with attorney fees and everything else. And then I let my, own emotional state not go to ruin, but
guide the process.
it could have been
Yeah.
better. It could have been better had I had other people on my team that weren't just there to help me through the legal aspect of things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why I'm a big fan of it. I'm a big advocate for folks like you and for all of us working together to try to get people through the other side out to the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's reciprocal. I'm very grateful there are people like you helping people with those pragmatics that, somebody like myself can't help people figure those pieces out, but I do know that they need that help on their team, or, that just becomes a threat over and over.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining me. We're one of these. We're going to do another one of these because
all right. I'm all for it.
I still have about 50 other questions I need to ask you. But in the meantime, Doctor, where can our listeners find out more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, they can find out about me at learntoloveyourstory.com. And also, I have a podcast myself that's called Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving. It's focused on women in midlife, but I have a lot of male listeners, not going to lie, because it's really universal information that I put out there into the world. And I interview people that are experts in their fields too, to give resources to my listenership.
Awesome. If you're driving, don't worry. We're going to put all the information in the show notes. You'll have all the social media stuff. All that, it'll all be out there posted for you in the next couple of days here. But again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all of you listeners for listening in. If you need more information about the work that we do at Allegiant Divorce Solutions, you can find us at allegiantds.com or click on the link, subscribe, like, follow, do all that amazing stuff. And be on the lookout for another episode coming your way here pretty soon.